I'm standing by the door with my jacket draped over my arm, keys already in my palm, when Noah speaks. The apartment has settled into that particular quiet that comes after midnight, when the world outside seems to pause and hold its breath. Rain streaks down the tall windows, each drop catching the amber glow of the street lamp below, creating shifting patterns of light across the hardwood floor. Just stay until morning. The words hang in the air between us, soft and careful. I should keep walking. I should pull on my jacket, say something about an early class, about needing sleep in my own bed. The door handle is cool under my free hand, and I can feel the weight of the hallway beyond it, the stairs that lead down to the lobby, to the rain-soaked street, to the 15-minute walk back to my own empty room. But something in his voice stops me. I turn to look at Noah, really look at him. He's curled into the corner of his couch, legs tucked beneath him, wearing that old gray sweater that's too big for his frame. The sleeves hang past his wrists, and he's pulling them down over his hands the way he always does when he's nervous. His dark hair falls across his forehead, and in the dim light from the single lamp he's left on, his eyes seem larger than usual, more vulnerable. He's not looking at me directly. Instead, his gaze is fixed on some point near my feet, as if he's afraid to meet my eyes, afraid of what he might find there, or maybe afraid of what I might see in his. The invitation should feel casual. We've known each other for almost 2 years now, since we were assigned to the same discussion section in Professor Chin's sociology class. We've spent countless hours in this very room, studying for exams, working on group projects, ordering takeout at ungodly hours, and falling asleep to whatever documentary Netflix decided to queue up next. I've crashed here before, though always in the guest bedroom down the hall, never on the couch, never like this. But tonight feels different. Tonight, the space between us seems charged with something neither of us has been willing to name. I think about the way the evening unfolded. How I'd come over around 8, textbooks in hand, with every intention of reviewing for tomorrow's midterm. How we'd spread our notes across his coffee table and managed maybe 30 minutes of actual studying before we started talking instead. About everything and nothing. About the professor who clearly has favorites. About Noah's younger sister starting college next year. About the way the leaves have been changing color outside the library windows. Normal things. Safe things. Except somewhere in the conversation, the distance between us on the couch had started to shrink. Not intentionally, not obviously, but gradually, naturally, like gravity was pulling us toward each other. By 10 o'clock, we'd abandoned any pretense of studying. By 11, we were sharing a pint of ice cream Noah found in his freezer, passing it back and forth without really thinking about it, our fingers brushing when we exchanged the spoon. And I felt it then, that little spark of electricity, the way my breath caught when his thumb grazed my knuckles. The way he lingered a beat too long before pulling away. Now, past midnight, with my jacket in my hands and the rain drumming against the windows, I realize we've been building toward this moment all evening. Maybe longer. Just stay until morning. It's such a simple request. Practical, even. The weather outside is miserable, and my dorm is across campus. It would make sense to wait it out to avoid getting soaked on the walk home. But Noah's voice carries an undertone I recognize, a quiet longing that has nothing to do with convenience or weather patterns. I set my jacket down on the small table by the door. The sound it makes is soft, barely audible, but in the quiet of the apartment, it feels significant. Final. When I turn back toward the living room, Noah is watching me now, his expression unreadable. There's something in his face that reminds me of the way he looked during freshman orientation, when we were still strangers navigating the awkwardness of new friendships. Hopeful but guarded, wanting something he's not sure he's allowed to ask for. I walk back to the couch, and he shifts to make room for me, though there was already plenty of space. When I sit down, I'm more aware than usual of the distance between us, of the way his presence seems to radiate warmth even across the cushions that separate us. The rain continues its steady rhythm against the glass. In the lamp's golden circle of light, the rest of the apartment fades into soft shadows. Noah's bookshelf with its carefully arranged novels and psychology textbooks. The framed photographs on his mantel, Mostly family pictures from beach vacations and graduation ceremonies. The small potted plant on the windowsill that he somehow manages to keep alive despite his claims of having no green thumb. It's a space I know well, but tonight it feels different. More intimate. Like we're the only two people in the world suspended in this moment between what was and what might be. Noah pulls the throw blanket from the back of the couch, unfolding it across both our laps without asking. His movements are careful, deliberate, as if he's afraid any sudden gesture might break whatever spell has settled over us. The blanket is soft, worn from years of use, and it carries the faint scent of the lavender detergent Noah's mom sends him from home. We sit in silence for a while, listening to the rain. I'm hyper-aware of everything. The way Noah's breathing seems slightly unsteady, the warmth of his leg near mine under the blanket, the way his fingers worry at the hem of his sweater. There's something building between us, something that's been growing for months in stolen glances and lingering conversations, in the way he always saves me a seat in lecture halls, and the way I always text him first when something good or terrible happens. I've been telling myself it's just friendship, close friendship, the kind that develops naturally when you spend enough time with someone, when you start to care about their happiness almost as much as your own. But sitting here now, with the city quiet outside and nothing but honesty in the space between us, I can't pretend anymore. The truth is, I've been in love with Noah for longer than I want to admit. Not the desperate, consuming kind of love that burns bright and fast, but something deeper and more patient. The kind of love that grows slowly, taking root in shared silence and easy laughter. In a way, he makes coffee for two every morning, even when he doesn't know if I'm coming over. In a way, he remembers that I hate mushrooms on pizza and always picks them off without being asked. I've been in love with him, and I've been terrified of it. Terrified of ruining what we have, of misreading signals, of wanting something he might not be able to give. So I've kept it locked away, hidden behind casual friendship and careful boundaries. But now, in the quiet of his apartment with rain painting patterns on the windows, those boundaries are starting to dissolve. Noah shifts beside me, and I feel the couch dip slightly as he moves closer. Not dramatically, not in a way that demands acknowledgement, but enough that I can feel the warmth of his shoulder near mine, can catch the familiar scent of his shampoo when he turns his head. My heart is beating faster now. I'm trying to keep my breathing steady. This feels like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown, like the moment before you jump and trust that you'll find solid ground on the other side. The clock on his mantel ticks softly in the background, marking time that suddenly feels both infinite and precious. Outside, the rain continues to fall, and I think about how it will still be raining in the morning, how the world will still be the same, but somehow we might not be. Just stay until morning. Such a simple request. But as I sit here beside him, feeling the careful space between us charged with possibility, I understand that Noah isn't just asking me to wait out the storm. He's asking me to stay for something else entirely, something we've both been circling for months without daring to name. And for the first time in my careful, cautious life, I think I'm ready to say yes. I've always been the kind of person who builds walls without meaning to. Not dramatic ones. Not the kind that shut people out entirely, but careful boundaries that keep everything manageable, predictable. Structure has been my salvation since I was 15 and my parents divorced, since I learned that chaos could unravel a life faster than you could rebuild it. My days follow patterns I've perfected over 3 years of college. Morning classes, afternoon shifts at the campus bookstore, evenings in the library until they announce closing time over the intercom. I study late because the quiet helps me focus, because there's something comforting about being surrounded by knowledge that stays constant, facts that don't shift with someone's mood or disappear when you need them most. People see me as dependable, the friend they call when they need help moving furniture or someone to proofread their essays at midnight. I don't mind it. There's a certain safety in being needed for practical things, in relationships that have clear parameters and expectations. When Sarah from my economics class texts me about borrowing notes, when my roommate asks me to pick up groceries on my way home, when Professor Martinez asks if I can tutor struggling students for extra credit, I know exactly what's being asked of me. But what no one sees, what I've become expert at hiding, is how empty my apartment feels when I come home after everyone else has gone to bed. How I sometimes lie awake listening to the sounds of the building settling around me, feeling like I'm floating in space, disconnected from anything that matters. How I've taught myself to be so self-sufficient that I've forgotten how to need anyone else. Until Noah. I met him during sophomore year in a way that felt inevitable, like the universe had been quietly arranging the pieces. We were both running late to Professor Chen's discussion section, both slipping through the door with mumbled apologies as she was already writing the day's topic on the whiteboard. The only empty seats were next to each other in the back row, and when Noah dropped into the chair beside me, slightly out of breath and smelling faintly of the coffee he'd clearly been rushing to finish, something in my carefully ordered world shifted. He was different from the beginning, where I approached everything with measured consideration. Noah moved through life with an openness that should have been reckless, but somehow wasn't. He raised his hand in class not because he was certain of his answers, but because he was genuinely curious about the questions. He smiled at strangers in the hallway, remembered details about people's lives that they'd mentioned in passing weeks earlier, offered to share his lunch with anyone who looked hungry. Noah lived with his heart visible, and it terrified me how much I wanted to be close to that kind of warmth. Our friendship developed in the spaces between classes, in study sessions that turned into conversations about everything except what we'd intended to review. Noah had a way of asking questions that made you want to answer honestly, of listening that made you feel heard rather than judged. When I mentioned that I'd never been to the art museum downtown, he suggested we go the following weekend, casual, as if we'd known each other for years rather than months. That first afternoon wandering through galleries together, I learned that Noah saw the world in layers I'd never noticed. He could stand in front of a painting for 10 minutes, finding details and meanings that escaped me entirely. But when he tried to explain what he was seeing, his words came out jumbled with excitement. He laughed at his own inability to articulate what moved him, and that laugh did something to me, loosened something I'd kept carefully controlled. Over time, I began to understand that Noah's brightness was both genuine and complicated. Yes, he approached life with an optimism that seemed effortless, but underneath, it was someone who felt things deeply, maybe too deeply. He carried his family's expectations like a weight he couldn't set down, worried constantly about his younger sister navigating high school. Threw himself into helping others because sitting still with his own thoughts became overwhelming. I recognized something familiar in that restlessness, though where I dealt with uncertainty by building routines, Noah seemed to scatter his energy in every direction, as if moving fast enough might outrun whatever was chasing him. Our late-night study sessions became less about academics and more about the conversations that happened when exhaustion stripped away our usual defenses. Noah would tell me about the pressure he felt to have everything figured out, how everyone expected him to be the happy one, the one who held everything together for everyone else. I found myself sharing things I'd never said out loud, about the loneliness that lived in the center of my organized life, about how sometimes being strong felt indistinguishable from being isolated. Those conversations created something between us that I didn't have words for. Not quite friendship, though that's what we called it. Something more intimate than casual connection, but undefined enough that I could pretend it didn't threaten the careful boundaries I'd built around my heart. Months passed this way, with us circling closer to something neither of us named. Coffee dates that felt like dates until one of us mentioned seeing other people. Walks across campus that stretched longer than necessary, taking the scenic route because neither wanted the conversation to end. Movie nights in his apartment where we'd end up talking through the credits, reluctant to let the evening conclude. I told myself it was normal, this intensity of caring about someone's happiness. This way Noah's mood could shift the entire temperature of my day. When he seemed stressed about exams, I'd show up with his favorite takeout without being asked. When I had trouble sleeping, he'd text me articles he thought I'd find interesting, as if he somehow knew I was lying awake staring at the ceiling. We were taking care of each other in ways that felt automatic, necessary, like breathing. But tonight, sitting on his couch with rain drawing patterns on the windows and the weight of unspoken things filling the space between us, I can't pretend anymore that what we have fits neatly into any category I understand. The careful distance I've maintained, the boundaries that have kept me safe, are dissolving in the warmth of his presence beside me. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not sure I want them back. Noah doesn't frame it as anything more than practicality when he first suggests I stay. The rain is coming down harder now, drumming against the windows with the kind of persistence that promises it won't let up anytime soon. He gestures toward the glass, his voice carrying that casual tone he uses when he's trying not to ask for too much. "It's late," he says. "Don't walk home in the rain. Just stay." But even as the words leave his mouth, I can hear something underneath them, something that has nothing to do with weather or convenience. There's a tremor in his voice, so slight I might have missed it if I hadn't spent 2 years learning to read the subtle shifts in his moods. The way his brightness sometimes cracks just enough to let the loneliness show through. When I hesitate, still holding my keys, still feeling the pull of my own space and my own bed and the safety of routine, Noah's expression changes. The casual mask slips, just for a moment, and I see something raw in his eyes. Something that looks like need, though he'd never call it that. Something that looks like fear, though he'd probably deny it if I asked. He's sitting forward now, no longer curled into the corner of the couch, his hands clasped in front of him in a gesture I recognize as his tell when he's working up the courage to say something important. I've seen him do this before presentations in class, before difficult phone calls home, before any moment that requires him to be vulnerable in ways that don't come naturally despite his open nature. The invitation isn't about the storm outside, I realize. It's about the one he carries inside, the restlessness that keeps him moving through his days at double speed, the way he fills every silence with words or music or activity, because stillness makes him confront things he'd rather outrun. I know because I recognize it. The loneliness that lives in the spaces between interactions, the way you could be surrounded by people and still feel fundamentally alone. The difference is that I've learned to make peace with solitude, to find comfort in my own company, while Noah seems to fear it like something that might swallow him whole. He's asking me to stay because he doesn't want to be alone with whatever thoughts crowd his mind when the distractions fade. But more than that, he's asking me specifically, and that specificity carries weight we've both been pretending doesn't exist. Anyone could keep him company. He has other friends, people who would come over if he called, who would stay until morning without thinking twice about it. Sarah from our sociology class, who has a crush on him that she thinks she's hiding. Marcus from his photography workshop, who's always inviting Noah to parties and gallery openings. Even his roommate Tom, who's probably just down the hall in his own room, available if Noah knocked on his door. But he's not asking any of them. He's asking me. And the weight of that choice settles between us like something solid, something that can't be taken back once acknowledged. I set my keys down next to my jacket on the small table by the door. The sound they make is soft but definitive, and I watch Noah's shoulders relax slightly, as if he'd been holding his breath waiting for my answer. When I return to the couch, the space between us feels different than it did just moments ago. Charged with possibility, heavy with things we're not yet ready to name. Noah pulls the blanket back over both our legs, and this time when his knee brushes against mine under the soft fabric, neither of us moves away. We sit in the new quiet for a while, listening to the rain paint patterns against the glass. The lamp beside the couch casts everything in warm, golden light, making the rest of the apartment fade into soft shadows. It feels like we're in a bubble, separate from the world outside, suspended in this moment that feels both ordinary and extraordinary. Noah starts talking first, his voice softer than usual. He tells me about not sleeping well lately, about lying awake staring at the ceiling while his mind races through everything he should be doing, everything he's worried about getting wrong. He talks about the pressure he feels to have his life figured out, to be the version of himself that everyone expects, cheerful and confident and endlessly capable. I find myself telling him things I've never said out loud, about how tired I am of always being the reliable one, the friend everyone turns to but no one worries about the exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together so completely that you forget what it feels like to let someone else carry some of the weight. The conversation moves slowly, carefully, like we're navigating unfamiliar territory where one wrong step might change everything. But there's relief in it too, in finally saying these things to someone who understands, who doesn't try to fix or dismiss or minimize what we're sharing. Somewhere in the middle of talking about his family's expectations, Noah shifts closer on the couch. Not dramatically, not in a way that demands acknowledgement, but enough that I can feel the warmth of his body next to mine. When he leans back against the cushions, his shoulder brushes mine and stays there. I should probably move. Maintained the careful distance we've always kept, the boundaries that have allowed our friendship to exist without complication. But I don't want to move. For once in my carefully controlled life, I want to stay exactly where I am, close enough to feel his breathing, close enough to catch the familiar scent of his shampoo when he turns his head. The rain continues outside, steady and persistent, and I think about how it's given us this excuse, this reason to be here together in the warm circle of lamplight with nowhere else to go and nothing else to do, but finally be honest about what we've been dancing around for months. Noah's voice gets quieter as the night deepens, and when he admits that he hates being alone when everything gets heavy, when the cheerful mask becomes too exhausting to maintain, I understand that this invitation was never really about the weather at all. It was about trust, about wanting to let someone see the parts of himself he usually keeps hidden, about believing that maybe with the right person, being vulnerable doesn't have to mean being alone. The conversation shifts after that admission, becoming something softer and more honest than anything we've shared before. Noah tells me about the nights when sleep feels impossible, when his mind cycles through every worry and uncertainty until dawn creeps through his blinds. He describes lying in bed, listening to the building settle around him, feeling like he's the only person awake in the world, carrying thoughts too heavy for one person to hold alone. I understand that feeling more than I want to admit. The weight of being strong for everyone else, of maintaining the careful composure that others depend on, of never allowing yourself to need something you might not receive. I tell him about the exhaustion that comes from always being the one people turn to, how sometimes I lie awake wondering what it would feel like to be someone's first thought instead of their last resort. As we talk, the space between us continues to shrink. Not intentionally, not with any dramatic gestures or obvious moves, but gradually, naturally, like we're being drawn together by forces neither of us wants to resist. Noah shifts to face me more directly, tucking one leg beneath him, and the movement brings his knee against my thigh. When he doesn't move away, when I don't move away, something in the air between us changes. The blanket has become a shared territory now, covering both our legs, creating a small pocket of warmth that feels separate from the rest of the world. Outside, the rain continues its steady rhythm, but inside this apartment, inside this circle of lamplight and honest conversation, time seems to slow and stretch. Noah's voice grows quieter as he tells me about his family, about being the older brother who was supposed to have everything figured out by now, about his sister starting college next year and looking to him for guidance he's not sure he can provide, about his parents' quiet disappointment when he changed his major from pre-med to psychology, their careful questions about his future that feel more like gentle accusations. I share things I've never told anyone, about the pressure I put on myself to be perfect because chaos feels like the alternative, about how my parents' divorce taught me that caring too much makes you vulnerable to devastation, about the careful distances I maintain not because I don't want closeness, but because I'm terrified of needing something I might lose. Somewhere in the middle of this exchange, Noah reaches out and touches my hand where it rests on the couch between us. It's a small gesture, barely more than his fingers brushing against my knuckles, but the contact sends electricity through my entire body. His touch is warm and tentative, asking permission without words, offering comfort that I didn't realize I needed until this moment. I don't pull away. Instead, I find myself turning my hand palm up, allowing our fingers to intertwine in a way that feels both natural and revolutionary. His hand is smaller than mine, but surprisingly strong, and when he squeezes gently, I feel something crack open inside my chest, some carefully guarded place that I've kept locked for so long I've forgotten it existed. We keep talking, but the conversation takes on a different quality now. More intimate, more vulnerable, woven through with the awareness of our connected hands and the way this simple touch has shifted everything between us. Noah tells me about feeling like he's performing his own life sometimes, smiling and laughing and being the person everyone expects while some essential part of himself watches from a distance, lonely and disconnected. I admit that I recognized something in him from the beginning, something that matched the isolation I carry despite being surrounded by people who consider me dependable, trustworthy, safe. How I've spent years perfecting the art of being needed without needing in return, of giving support without asking for it, of building a life so structured and self-sufficient that vulnerability became a foreign concept. As the night deepens, Noah shifts again, and this time his movement is more deliberate. He leans closer, close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to count his eyelashes if I wanted to. His free hand comes up to rest against my shoulder, not quite an embrace, but something approaching it, something that speaks of wanting to be closer still. My heart is beating so hard I'm certain he must be able to hear it, but when he doesn't comment, when he just looks at me with those impossibly gentle eyes, I realize that maybe he's feeling the same acceleration, the same sense of standing at the edge of something vast and unnamed. The lamp beside us flickers slightly, casting shifting shadows across Noah's face, and in that golden, unstable light, he looks like someone I've known forever and someone I'm meeting for the first time. His thumb traces small circles against my shoulder, a gesture so tender it makes my breath catch, and I understand that we've moved far beyond friendship now, into territory neither of us has mapped. He tells me he's never felt as comfortable with another person as he does with me, that talking to me feels like coming home after a long journey. His voice is barely above a whisper now, intimate and honest in the quiet of the apartment. And when I tell him I feel the same, that being with him makes me remember what it's like to want something more than safety, his smile transforms his entire face. Outside, the storm shows no sign of letting up, but inside, wrapped in this blanket and this conversation and the surprising warmth of human connection, I find myself hoping it lasts until morning. Not because I'm afraid of getting wet on the walk home, but because I'm not ready for this moment to end, for whatever spell has settled over us to break. Noah's head settles against my shoulder then, a movement so natural it feels like something we've done 1,000 times before. The weight of him there, warm and trusting and real, breaks something open in me that I didn't even know was closed. For the first time in years, I'm not thinking about tomorrow's responsibilities or next week's deadlines or any of the careful plans that usually occupy my thoughts. I'm here, completely present in this moment, feeling like I finally understand what it means to belong somewhere, to someone without reservation. The conversation eventually slows to a comfortable quiet, our words becoming fewer as exhaustion settles over both of us like a second blanket. Noah's breathing has grown steadier against my shoulder. I can feel the gradual relaxation of his body as the night's honesty takes its toll. Outside, the rain continues its gentle percussion against the windows, but inside, we've created our own small world of warmth and connection. I'm not sure when we decide to try sleeping. There's no formal discussion about it. No moment where we acknowledge that we're too tired to keep talking or that the couch has become our bed for the night. Instead, it happens gradually, naturally, with Noah shifting to lie down and me following his lead, both of us moving with the careful consideration of people who don't want to break whatever spell has settled over us. The couch is narrow, barely wide enough for one person to sleep comfortably, let alone two. But somehow we make it work, with Noah curled against the back cushions and me pressed against his side, our bodies fitting together with surprising ease. The throw blanket barely covers us both, but our shared warmth makes up for what the fabric can't provide. Noah's arm finds its way around my waist, tentative at first, as if he's not sure he's allowed this level of closeness. When I don't pull away, when I actually shift closer to accommodate the embrace, his hold becomes more certain. His hand comes to rest against the small of my back, warm through the thin fabric of my shirt, and the simple weight of it there makes something in my chest flutter and settle simultaneously. I lie awake for a long time after Noah's breathing evens out into the rhythm of sleep. Not because I'm uncomfortable or because the couch is too small, but because I'm overwhelmed by the intimacy of this moment, by the trust Noah has placed in me, by allowing himself to be this vulnerable. There's something profound about being chosen to witness someone sleep, to be the person they feel safe enough to let their guard down with completely. In the dim light filtering through the blinds, I can see the relaxed lines of Noah's face, the way sleep has smoothed away the careful brightness he wears during the day. His hair falls across his forehead in dark waves, and his lips are slightly parted, peaceful in a way that makes my heart ache with tenderness. This is Noah without performance, without the cheerful mask he shows the world, and I feel privileged to see him like this. But as I lie there, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, feeling the warm weight of his arm around me, something shifts in my understanding of what's happening between us. This isn't just comfort. This isn't just two friends sharing space on a too small couch during a rainstorm. This is love, messy and unspoken and frightening in its honesty. The revelation hits me like a physical thing, stealing my breath for a moment. I've been calling it friendship, telling myself that these feelings are normal, that everyone cares about their friends this intensely. But lying here in the darkness with Noah's body pressed against mine, with his trust wrapped around me like a second skin, I can't lie to myself anymore. I'm in love with him, not the careful, manageable affection I've allowed myself to acknowledge, but something deeper and more consuming. The kind of love that rearranges your priorities, that makes you want to reorganize your entire life around someone else's happiness. The kind of love that terrifies me because it requires a level of vulnerability I've spent years learning to avoid. I think about the months we've spent circling each other, the careful dance we've performed around these feelings. All those study sessions that turned into conversations about everything except what we were supposed to be reviewing. All those walks across campus that took longer than necessary because neither of us wanted them to end. All those moments when the air between us felt charged with possibility that we were both too scared to acknowledge. Noah stirs slightly in his sleep, his arm tightening around me in what seems like a reflex, like he's afraid I might disappear if he doesn't hold on tight enough. The unconscious gesture breaks something open in my chest, flooding me with a tenderness so acute it's almost painful. He never wanted me just for the night, I realize. This invitation, this request to stay until morning, wasn't about temporary comfort or convenient companionship. It was about hope, about believing that maybe, finally, he found someone who could see past the cheerful facade to the person underneath, someone who could love him for who he really is rather than who he pretends to be. And the truth is, I do see him. I see the way he worries about everyone else's problems while neglecting his own. I see the loneliness he carries despite being surrounded by people who adore him. I see the exhaustion that comes from being the bright, happy one all the time, from never allowing himself to need support or comfort or care. I see all of that, and I love him more for it, not less. But that's what terrifies me, because now that I've acknowledged this love, now that I've allowed myself to feel it fully, I can't unfeel it. There's no going back to the careful friendship we had before, no returning to the safe distance that protected us both from exactly this kind of vulnerability. The rain outside has softened to a gentle patter, no longer the driving force that gave us an excuse to be here together. But Noah's hold on me hasn't loosened, and I find myself pressing closer to him instead of creating the space that logic tells me I should want. Tomorrow, we'll have to figure out what this means, what we want from each other, whether we're brave enough to risk everything we have for the possibility of something more. Tomorrow, we'll have to use words to name what's happening between us, to make choices that will determine whether this night becomes the beginning of something beautiful or the end of something safe. But for now, in the darkness of early morning with Noah's breath warm against my neck and his trust heavy in my arms, I allow myself to feel this love completely, to acknowledge that somewhere in the last few hours, holding him has stopped feeling like pretending and started feeling like coming home. Dawn comes slowly, filtering through the blinds in pale gray strips that gradually warm to gold. I've been awake for hours, but I haven't moved, reluctant to disturb the perfect stillness of Noah sleeping against me. His breathing has remained steady and deep, his arms still wrapped around my waist with that unconscious possessiveness that speaks of trust so complete it exists beyond conscious thought. But as the light grows stronger, reality begins to creep back in. The storm has passed, leaving only the gentle drip of water from the fire escape outside the window. The practical reasons for staying the night have evaporated with the rain clouds, and soon Noah will wake to find us tangled together on his couch, closer than we've ever been, having crossed lines we can't uncross. I feel the moment he begins to surface from sleep, the subtle change in his breathing, the way his body tenses slightly as consciousness returns. His arm tightens around me reflexively before he's fully awake, and I wonder if he's dreaming, if in that space between sleep and waking he's forgotten to be careful about what he allows himself to want. When his eyes finally open, they're soft and unfocused, still heavy with sleep. For a moment, he just looks at me, and I can see the exact second when full awareness returns, when he remembers where we are and how we ended up pressed together like this. I expect him to pull away, to create the distance that daylight seems to demand, to return to the careful boundaries that have defined our friendship until now. But he doesn't move. Instead, his gaze grows more focused, more intentional, and something in his expression makes my heart start beating faster. There's a question in his eyes, tentative but hopeful, as if he's trying to read something in my face that will tell him what this means, what happens next. Stay a little longer, he whispers, his voice rough with sleep, and something else, something that sounds like longing he's finally allowing himself to voice. The words hang in the air between us, and I understand that this moment is different from last night's invitation. This isn't about convenience or weather or the practical difficulties of going home in the rain. This is Noah asking me to choose him, to choose us, to choose the possibility of something real and frightening and beautiful over the safety of pretending this was just one night of comfort between friends. I'm balanced on the edge of two different lives. In one, I slip away quietly, make some excuse about morning classes or work obligations, let the awkwardness of daylight convince us both that whatever happened in the darkness was temporary, meaningless, a moment of weakness we can pretend never occurred. We go back to being friends, careful friends who never quite look each other in the eye the same way again, who carry the weight of this night between us like a secret that grows heavier with time. In the other life, I stay. I acknowledge what's been building between us for months, what crystallized into something undeniable in the small hours of this morning when I finally admitted to myself that this is love. I risk everything we have for the possibility of everything we could be. The choice should be obvious. I've spent years building a life based on careful decisions, measured risks, the kind of practical planning that keeps you safe from disappointment. Everything I've learned about self-preservation tells me to leave now, to protect what we have instead of gambling it away for something uncertain. But looking at Noah in the morning light, seeing the hope and fear warring in his expression, feeling the warmth of his body against mine, and remembering the way he held me through the night like I was something precious, I realized that safety isn't what I want anymore. I don't want this to end, I whisper back, the words coming out before I can second-guess them, before my usual caution can overrule the honesty that the night has taught me. The smile that spreads across Noah's face is unlike anything I've ever seen from him. Not the bright, performative happiness he shows the world, but something quieter and more real, tinged with relief and joy and a vulnerability that makes my chest ache. His hand comes up to cup my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone with a tenderness that feels like a promise. We lie there in the growing light, not talking, just looking at each other and breathing in the magnitude of what we've just acknowledged. The apartment is quiet around us, the world outside beginning to stir with the sounds of morning traffic and early commuters, but inside this bubble we've created, time seems suspended. I can see the questions in Noah's eyes, the same ones that are probably reflected in my own. What does this mean? What do we do now? How do we navigate this transition from friendship to something deeper without losing what made us work in the first place? But for now, those questions can wait. For now, there's just this: the weight of his arm around me, the warmth of his palm against my face, the way the morning light catches the gold flecks in his brown eyes. There's the knowledge that we've both chosen courage over comfort, honesty over safety, the possibility of love over the certainty of loneliness. Noah shifts closer, if that's even possible, on the narrow couch, and I feel his forehead come to rest against mine. His breath is warm against my lips, and the space between us has become so small it would take almost nothing to close it completely. But we don't rush. We've waited months to get to this moment, circled around it through countless conversations and careful distances and unspoken longings. Instead, we just breathe together in the golden light of morning. Two people who have finally found the courage to want something more than survival, something more than the careful half-life of keeping everyone at arm's length. We've chosen each other, chosen this fragile, terrifying, beautiful possibility of love. And for the first time in my carefully controlled life, the future feels like something to anticipate rather than something to prepare for. Tomorrow is no longer a series of obligations to fulfill and plans to execute. It's a question mark shaped like hope, and I'm finally ready to find out what the answer might be. By the time the sun climbs high enough to flood the apartment with warm, golden light, we've moved beyond words entirely. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because everything important has already been spoken in the language of touch and breath and the way we look at each other when we think the other isn't watching. The morning light paints everything in soft amber tones, transforming the familiar space of Noah's living room into something that feels sacred, separate from the ordinary world. Dust motes dance in the sunbeams that stretch across the hardwood floor, and somewhere in the building above us, I can hear the muffled sounds of neighbors beginning their day. Shower running, coffee brewing, the distant hum of morning news programs. But those sounds feel like they're coming from another universe. Here, in this pocket of warmth, entangled limbs, and newfound honesty, time moves differently. The urgency that usually drives my mornings, the mental checklist of classes and obligations, and carefully scheduled responsibilities, has evaporated completely. For once in my adult life, there's nowhere else I need to be. Noah hasn't let go of me since we made our quiet declarations. His arm remains around my waist, his hand tracing lazy patterns against my back through the thin fabric of my shirt. Sometimes his fingers pause in their wandering, pressing gently as if to reassure himself that I'm real, that this isn't some elaborate dream he'll wake from to find himself alone on the couch. I understand the impulse. There's something almost surreal about this transformation, about the way everything between us has shifted so fundamentally in the space of a single night. Yesterday, we were friends who maintained careful boundaries, who danced around our feelings with the practiced precision of people who've learned to protect themselves from disappointment. Today, we're something else entirely, something we don't have words for yet, but that feels as natural as breathing. The throw blanket has long since slipped to the floor, but we haven't moved to retrieve it. The warmth we generate together is enough, and there's something beautiful about the way the morning light plays across our intertwined bodies, highlighting the contrast between Noah's darker skin and my own, the way our hands fit together with surprising perfection. I watch Noah in the growing light, memorizing the details I've never allowed myself to notice so openly before. The way his eyelashes cast small shadows across his cheekbones. The tiny scar near his left eyebrow from a childhood accident he told me about months ago. The gentle curve of his mouth, relaxed now in a way I've rarely seen when he's awake, free from the effort of maintaining his usual bright optimism. He catches me looking and smiles, not the performative brightness he shows the world, but something softer and more private, meant only for me. There's contentment in his expression, but also wonder, as if he can't quite believe we've finally arrived at this place we've been circling for so long. The sunlight has warmed the apartment considerably, and I can feel drowsiness pulling at the edges of my consciousness despite having dozed fitfully through the early morning hours. But I resist the urge to close my eyes, unwilling to miss even a moment of this, afraid that if I sleep again, I might wake to find that this fragile new thing between us has somehow evaporated. Noah seems to sense my thoughts, or perhaps he's feeling the same reluctance to let ordinary time reclaim us. His hand comes up to cup my face again, thumb brushing across my cheek in a gesture that's becoming familiar, but no less electric for its repetition. We should probably talk about what happens next, about how we navigate this shift from friendship to whatever this is becoming. There are practical considerations, what we tell our friends, how we handle the inevitable questions and speculation, whether we're ready for the scrutiny that comes with changing the fundamental nature of a relationship that others have watched develop. But those conversations can wait. They belong to the world beyond this apartment, to the version of ourselves that has to function in classrooms and coffee shops, and all the spaces where we've learned to be careful about what we want and what we allow ourselves to hope for. Right now, there's only this, the weight of Noah's body against mine, the way his breathing has synced with my own, the profound peace that comes from finally being exactly where you belong. I've spent so much of my life feeling like an observer of my own experience, maintaining the careful distance necessary to stay safe from disappointment. But lying here with Noah in the morning light, feeling more connected to another person than I've ever been, I understand for the first time what it means to be fully present in a moment, to be completely vulnerable and completely safe at the same time. The promise of just until morning has stretched into something neither of us dared to hope for when this night began. What started as an invitation born of loneliness and storm-dark skies has become the beginning of something that feels like it could last forever if we're brave enough to tend it carefully. I think about the careful walls I've built around my heart, the structures that have kept me safe but also kept me isolated. In the space of a single night, Noah has walked through those defenses like they were made of paper, not because he forced his way in, but because I finally found the courage to open the door. Outside, the city has fully awakened. Cars pass on the street below, their tires hissing softly on the still wet pavement. Somewhere a door slams, and I can hear the distant sound of laughter from the courtyard behind the building. The world continues its relentless motion, but here in Noah's arms, I found a kind of stillness I didn't know existed. This is what I've been searching for without realizing it. Not just love, but belonging. Not just connection, but home. And as Noah's eyes drift close in the warm sunlight, and his breathing deepens towards sleep again, I allow myself to imagine a future built from mornings like this one, from the quiet courage of choosing love over safety, from the revolutionary act of letting someone hold you like you're something precious that they never want to let go.